it's an entirely different way of thinking about media,
It is,
about
yeah.
filtration.
Yeah.
So you don't need masses of it.
No.
You can move it to increase its kind of contact time, and it's all about the higher life forms that live within it. And that's
Hi everyone, my name is George Farmer. I'm here today with Jeremy Gay from
Hello.
Evolution Aqua, and today we're going to talk about filter media, and I believe this is K1
K1
and K1 Micro.
K1 Micro.
So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah.
The history behind it maybe?
Yeah, so Evolution Aqua, as you know, manufacture filters, but
Yep.
we also manufacture the filter media to go in the filters.
Okay, cool.
So we manufacture two medias here. This is K1, which is fairly well known, and this smaller version is called K1 Micro. So let's start with, what do you know about existing biological filtration? What does that mean to you?
Well, it means basically converting fish waste to ammonia to nitrite to
Yeah.
nitrate.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, the nitrogen cycle.
Okay, so there's different ways that you can do that and different medias you can use. So traditionally you would put them in your external filter and you just pack them in, and that's what we would call a static bed.
Okay.
But in the pond filters like the Nexus, you've probably seen it all churning
Travelling
around,
away, yeah.
and that's what in pond we call a moving bed.
Right.
So this media was specifically designed to work as a moving bed media, and it was a bit of a world first at the time. It's kind of revolutionary literally in how it works.
Yeah.
And so basically, if you've got a conventional filter like a trickle filter, say, you pour water in at the top and it sprinkles all down through the media.
Yeah.
You know, nitrifying bacteria live on that media and they process the waste. But it's actually quite wasteful, because what happens is you trickle your water through media and it channels and it actually...
It takes the path of least resistance, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So over time, it actually just takes one route,
Right.
and it takes the easiest route all the time. So yes, you'll have some media that's getting, you know, ammonia-rich water. You may have some media that's getting no water at all. So when you compare a trickle filter with a moving bed filter, a moving bed filter is media that's always immersed in water, always exposed to ammonia, which it will then convert to nitrite, but also it's also exposed to oxygen. So it's got the advantage of the oxygen from a trickle filter, but it's got the advantage of the complete immersion from, say, a static bed filter. So that's kind of the key kind of thing with this. This is a floating media.
Right. So it will just literally float if you put it in a
Yeah.
tank of water.
Yeah,
Okay.
it will float.
Right. Whereas
And-
most other media will sink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then what happens is, over time, this media covers in biofilm. So at Evolution Aqua, you'll hear a lot of talk about biofilms.
Yeah.
So obviously bacteria we know about, they're living, they're aerobic, they consume oxygen as they convert ammonia and nitrite into nitrate, but also they live together in biofilms.
Right.
And you can get thin biofilms and you can get thick biofilms.
Okay.
And you can even get bacterial islands, which you'll see on mature K1. So I've got some media here.
So that's mature. So the brown stuff is that mature.
Yeah, so bacteria biofilms are brown, so that's lesson number one.
Right.
So brown filter media isn't necessarily algae and
Or
fish poo.
dirt, yeah,
It can
okay.
be good.
Right.
It can be a biofilm. So it starts off life as that, which is a white sterile media,
Yeah.
and it coats with the nitrifying bacteria, which deal with ammonia and nitrite. But it's also where they prefer to live that's important. So we can say that ceramic medias, you know, they're porous, water will travel through them, etc., etc. We don't believe that nitrifying bacteria want to live inside a porous ceramic media. Why? Because
Less oxygen.
less oxygen, less food. The food is going
Is it?
past the outside of the media.
Oh,
They don't
okay.
want to be on the inside.
Yeah.
So they're aerobic and they need food. So they want to live in a
In-
biofilm,
yeah,
in a
yeah.
community on the outside where the food is and where the oxygen is.
So that, I guess that's why it's designed like it is, then. So where that cross is,
Yeah,
you know, right in the middle of there,
yeah.
they're kind of protected, aren't they?
Yeah, so that's an important point. So you've got protected surface area. So you've got surface area on the outside of it,
Yeah.
and you've got surface area on the inside of it. You see the little fins on the outside?
Yeah.
So when this media clashes together, when it's being
Tumbled and-
and
yeah.
fluidised,
Yeah.
so you get a certain amount of protection from the fins on the outside, but also inside the cross, which you might be able to see there. We'll show you some pictures.
Yeah.
That's what we call protected surface area. So no matter how fast and aggressively you tumble this media, there's a lovely microcosm of the perfect water flow going through the middle of the media, and that can be really slow. And that's where higher organisms like to live, like filter feeding organisms. So even within K1 and K1 micro, you put that under the microscope, you have a look through that, so you think, oh, that's all fish sludge in there.
Yeah.
That's bacteria. You see where they're choosing to live. So, and also importantly, George, can you see the media is holding the water in a meniscus?
Oh yeah.
So that protects it as well.
Wow.
So that shows you the key difference with this media. So you've actually got populations of bacteria, but also higher organisms like filter feeding Vorticella, which live inside it. So important fact number 2, this is great. You put this under the microscope. So we found that there are these filter feeding organisms, a bit like kind of sponges in a reef tank, or a bit like kind of fanworm type things, and they process water. So they suck in dirty water, trap the food, eat the food, and process clean water. So not only are you using mechanical and biological filtration in its conventional sense, but you're getting nature to give you a helping hand, because these tiny filter feeders are also trapping waste, feeding on the waste, reducing waste.
So they're actually like a small animal?
Yes.
So they're like one up from a bacteria?
Yeah.
Or are they a form of bacteria?
No, they're up from that. They're kind of like tubes, a bit like, you know, sponges on a coral reef.
Yeah.
And they can kind of suck stuff in and process it. So it's all about the Vorticella. And they live, this is great as well, under the microscope they choose to live only in the right angles inside K1 and K1 micro. Not in the 45 degrees, not in the round bits, in the right angles. So there's an argument there to say that if your media does not have protected surface area with right angles of the right size and the right kind of, you know, flow through of water, you haven't got the perfect home for these higher organisms which help us filter.
Wow. So in a nutshell, what you're saying is one of these will do a lot more filtration than like a generic ceramic media of the same size. So
the way I view this is like an island of life. This is like a mini coral reef to me, but in fresh water. Do you know what I mean?
Okay,
It's got that has got everything on it. If you expose it to water with ammonia and oxygen, it'll do everything else for you. It becomes this living organism. So you take that white sterile piece, or that white sterile piece of K1 micro, and it turns into that and that. And you put that under the microscope, and that is a safari going on in there.
Yeah, cool. So you're often taught as a fish keeper that the more surface area, the better with biological filtration.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily key. It's surface area is important, but it's how it's used. So it needs to be protected.
Yeah.
And it's actually, as you just described, the physical characteristic of the surface, like the right angle.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And so you could get a giant brick of highly porous material and work out that it's got a tennis court's worth of surface area.
Yeah.
That's not where the bacteria will choose to live. The bacteria, the nitrifying aerobic bacteria, want to be on the outside where the food is.
Yeah.
But then when you clean that media, or if it's a sponge and flow reduces, so it starts off this amount of oxygen, this amount of water flowing through it, then with a sponge, the letdown in a sponge is it traps dirt, and then flow reduces, oxygen reduces, and the food to your bacteria reduces. So you get this unstable kind of highs and lows of bacterial activity. This is incredibly stable because it's always protected. Flow never reduces through this, you see.
Yeah. It's amazing. And it also acts as, so in the Nexus, for example, it acts as a mechanical filter as well.
Yeah. So there's other properties that this stuff does as well. So basically all these little fins and all those little crosses, if you put them all together in, say, I don't know, even a pop bottle or a bucket and run water through it, it slows that water down. And what happens when you slow water down is you get particulate settlement.
Yeah.
Now that's good because the particulate settlement, we know we've got higher life forms which like to eat it, but also this media can be used static, i.e. non-moving, as a mechanical filter. Now the good thing about that is you can then clean this media as violently as you want, and you still maintain the populations within it, and you still maintain flow. You'll never get a sponge that's, you know, if you start off with a sponge and it's this big, after 12 months of use it's that big and it doesn't spring back, and some of the you know, holes are clogged. This always maintains flow in biological and in mechanical.
Wow. So let's talk about applications then. So we talked about Nexus a little bit, which is obviously pond filtration. As a fluidised media. But it can be, I've seen it used in aquariums as well.
It's used in aquariums, it's used in fish farms, it's used in wastewater treatment. So in aquariums, very simply, I've got a standard generic external filter on a tropical fish tank, and in the basket section I just put a load of K1 micro. So it's float, so you've got to be aware of that. You know, if you take the top off the basket and it's underwater, your media will float out. But most baskets stack, and the base of the top basket becomes the lid of the bottom basket.
Right,
or they've got lids. So I just fill that with it, and I don't touch it. I look at it every few months.
And it's doing that tumbling thing?
No, it's static because I've sandwiched it all in.
Oh, I see.
So you could have a few bits in there, and you can't look inside your filter, but there's various ways of making it tumble.
That's cool.
So that's application number one, which is static. So you could put that into your external filter right now, as well as or in replacement of the standard media that it came with. The next application is to move it, which is when it gets really interesting. There's two ways that you can move this media. You can move it with water or with air. So you might have seen these things on YouTube, people get like pop bottles and put like, K1 or K1 micro in with an air stone, and it tumbles it.
I see.
Which is really cool. So you instantly get this biological filter. So you can have water entering at the top, at the bottom rather, the air creates an upflow through the media, tumbles all the media's really rich in oxygen and food, and that's your biological filter. So that's how you tumble it with air. You can also tumble it with water, like we did in our range of aquariums called EA Marine, whereby we use the force of water either going up or down to create a jet, which then makes the media spin.
Okay.
And the advantage, as we say, with moving bed is it's not single pass. And so if you were going to make a very simple pond filter or a very simple sump, you put baffles in and you'd send the water up and down and up and down and through. But it goes through once and then back into the tank and the pond, and then if you're lucky, that same bit of water with ammonia will go through again. By spinning it within that section, it's what we call multi-pass.
Right.
So you're getting it again and again and again, that water's coming through, and its contact time with that media is much longer. Much longer. So you can potentially use a much smaller amount of media. It's funny, the number of times I've written, you can never overfilter, you can never have too much media. You could have a skip full of media for a nano tank and it can only do good. But there's a difference. So with this media, because we now know that bacteria lives in biofilms and bacterial islands, they need food. And the more food you give them, the stronger the biofilm becomes, the thicker, and the healthier it becomes. And that's when you see, you can even see like dark brown spots on the media. So we actually promote that. So if someone says, I want to use a cubic metre of K1 for 10 fish, we'd say actually you want a lot less, because you don't want a thin,
really thin biofilm.
Unstable biofilm. You want a really thick one, and this is where K1 and K1 micro just love it. They love food, they love load. And so we use, a sensible amount of media, lots of load, lots of oxygen, lots of cleaning. It's self-cleaning media as well.
Amazing.
So it's.
So why micro then? Just for smaller applications?
Yeah, aquariums, specifically aquariums. We've had it in marine aquariums. We have it in commercial applications, in shop tanks, etc. But it's just a bit smaller. But the holes are smaller, and so you get a slightly different setup of life forms than you do in the larger K1.
Okay. And this is manufactured here at Evolution Aqua?
Yeah, this is completely unique to us. You've seen how it's being made. So it's interesting, and it's an entirely different way of thinking about media, filtration. So you don't need masses of it.
No.
You can move it to increase its kind of contact time, and it's all about the higher life forms that live within it, and that's K1 and K1 micro.
That's great, thanks Jeremy.